where your witness is from?
Alabama. I don't know. It's been quite long ago. This is their section. A little town called Hope. Well, that's Arkansas. Sorry.
You got a library.
Is Amanda going to be in here?
Yes, we just have to do some updated redactions, so she's scanning some stuff in, so we can do that.
So can we go ahead without Amanda right now? Or
Yes, we can start.
is she close by? Or?
Yeah, she went to 17 and scanning in, and then she's going to do the redactions right. 17. The copies are back there to scan it in, and she'll do the redactions in the courtroom.
Everybody ready?
Yes. Ma'am, for the record, I tried to get you into the Hilton, and they declined. Because the county owns the Hilton. So, I spoke up for you.
Well, thanks, I appreciate that.
Yes, and I just put in those documents.
If you do get a chance before you leave, go to the Hilton, the 32nd floor has a bar area that looks out over the city for that.
Okay.
Yeah, but you have to pay $20 a drink. No?
Oh, and they have small plates.
You sure? I thought it was 18. I felt like it was $20 once I tipped.
Well, we ordered coffee. They don't make coffee, so they go down to the second floor and get a coffee and drink. You think they could have got it first?
All rise for the jury.
Oh, you're probably cringing when you walk in here in the morning. Like you're safe, it's warm today.
Court is in session. Please be seated.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to continue with the trial. Thanks for your patience. We were doing something, I guess it was probably the elevators too. Anyway, all I can say about last night's game is that Bradley Zimmer is very good. And that's it. On behalf of the state,
Yes, Your Honor. The state will call Kristeen Baker.
and if you could approach him this morning. If you raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm, subject to the penalties of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give you will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Okay, please be seated. Chair won't move, so you have to move up toward the microphone. Are you soft spoken?
Not at all.
Good. That's everybody to this.
Good morning, Ms. Baker.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name and spell your name for the record?
My name is Kristeen Baker, spelled Kristen, Baker, Baker.
And Ms. Baker, are you employed?
I am employed.
Where are you employed at?
I'm employed by the great state of Alabama. I am employed by the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles as a parole and probation officer.
And Ms. Baker, how long have you been employed by the state of Alabama as a probation officer?
Since April of 2014.
And what sort of training experience do you have to be a probation officer there?
You have to have a 4-year degree. My degree is in criminal justice, and you have to go through a police academy, 15-week police academy. Our police academy is the Alabama Criminal Justice Training Center, and it is governed by our state troopers.
And what are the typical duties associated with your position?
My position is to supervise offenders who've primarily been convicted of felony offenses. I'm to help them transition while governing their conditions of their parole and their conditions of their sentencing agreement. So help them successfully transition back into the community.
And how are cases typically assigned to you?
Our office, they are assigned on rotation. So we have 13 officers, and just as cases come into our office, there's a rotation schedule.
And when something is assigned to you, what information is included in your file that you review with the individuals?
We get a sentencing order that comes directly from the court, from the clerk's office. The sentencing agreement tells us the conditions of their plea or their conviction. We also have their order of probation, which is our agency's document, and that also has a list of conditions that they have to abide to for in order to be in compliance under our supervision. And then we ask for a lot of personal documentations, ID and birth certificates and other identifying information.
And why do you need to know those conditions, or why is it important for those conditions to be included in your file?
So that we know, so that the offender knows, well, first of all, so that we know how to properly supervise the probationer, the offender, or the parolee. And also so that the offender knows how to remain in compliance and not to violate any of the offenses.
And how does your first meeting with somebody who is assigned to you typically go?
Yes, during we call it our rules appointment, the probationer will come in and I will review the conditions of probation with that person. I'll go over each condition, rule by rule. If there are any special conditions, I will review that with them as well and ask them if they have any questions and give them a calendar, a reporting calendar as to where and when they are to report, let them know about the fees associated with supervision and their court costs. So.
And why do you go over all that information with the individual assigned to your docket?
Because the offender can get jail time if they violate any of the conditions of their probation and or sentencing agreement. So it's imperative that I go over the conditions of probation, correctly with the offender.
I want to turn your attention to Joshua Gaspar. Was he assigned to your docket?
Yes, Mr. Gaspar was assigned to my caseload.
And do you see that person in the courtroom today?
I do.
Court looks up the stipulation that this witness can identify the defendant.
Thank you. And ma'am, when was Mr. Gaspar first assigned to your caseload?
He was assigned to me upon his conviction. He was convicted the end of August. However, I did not see him. His rules appointment wasn't until the beginning of September 2015.
Okay. And without going into any details of the offense, can you explain to me what his first meeting was like in regards to the rules appointment?
Yes. When Mr. Gaspar came in, I immediately knew that he wanted to transfer to Ohio. His sentencing agreement, his probation order had it written on top, transfer to Ohio. So we went over all of the rules and conditions of his probation. We went over special conditions as well that was listed on his probation order. And we discussed his transfer to Ohio, what he would need in order to transfer his supervision to the state of Ohio.
Now, included in your file for Mr. Gaspar is also included the judge's journal entry or the judge's order.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the process through which somebody assigned to your docket reviews those orders or receives those orders?
Absolutely. The sentencing order is the main source, it's the offender's main source, first source of compliance. And how that works is when an offender takes a plea or they are convicted, their defense attorney goes over this sentencing order with them. The sentencing order has a list of conditions that the offender has to abide by. The offender, the defense attorney, and the prosecutor, once they come up with an agreement, all sign that sentencing order. Then they go before the judge in court, and upon sentencing, the judge re-reviews that sentencing order verbatim with the offender and places them on probation or provides them with whatever sentence they're getting.
And is that sentencing order maintained in your file as a part of the file?
Yes, it is.
Is it kept in the ordinary course of business?
Yes, it is.
Can I approach, please, Your Honor?
Yeah.
I'm handing you what has been marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 1601, 1602, and 1603. Can you take a moment to review those items, please?
Okay.
And do you recognize those items, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
And how are you able to do so?
This is our primary sentencing order. This is our sentencing order. I see several of them daily.
And are those in the same or substantially similar condition to when they would have been added to your file?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, starting with 1601, can you tell us what that document is?
This is a summary of, a case action summary of everything that, in this particular case, that Mr. Gaspar went through. It's just a summary.
And Exhibit 1602, can you tell us what that is?
1602 is his sentencing order, and again, that gives a synopsis of exactly the date he was convicted, what he was convicted of, and his plea.
And 1603?
I read the wrong one. 1601 is the plea agreement, and that has the conditions, specific conditions of his plea that he has to abide by. 1603 is the summary.
Okay. And 1602 is still the sentencing order?
It's still the sentencing order, yes.
Now, Ms. Baker, are these items you would have reviewed the information or details of with the defendant?
I do vaguely go over, his defense attorney, the judge, and the prosecutor go over these details with him. However, special conditions listed in this document will be listed on his order of probation, and I reviewed that with him.
Okay. And were there special conditions in the order related to the defendant's driving privileges?
Yes.
Did you review those with them?
Yes.
And what were those conditions that you reviewed with the defendant?
His driver's license was suspended for 6 months. He had to do a court referral evaluation for treatment, necessary treatment. Those were his special conditions that came from the plea, in addition to the conditions of his probation that we review with him.
Now, when was it that you advised the defendant in regards to the special condition about his license?
During his rules appointment, and that was the first week of September. His rules appointment was, I believe, September 9th, 2015. It was the first week in September 2015.
Now, you indicated that the defendant was attempting to transfer to Ohio.
Yes.
How long did he remain on your case, though?
Yes, Mr. Gaspar was my first out-of-state transfer, so the transfer got sent back to me twice. And so it forced him to remain under my supervision until January of 2016. Well, January of 2016 is when the state of Ohio accepted him. So I saw him, and they accepted him really early. I believe it was the second week in January.
And how often did you meet with him?
Once per month.
And did he have all your contact information?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
And how were his meetings with you scheduled?
We have a calendar that they have to report by, with the exception of when he had to report to me for the OS travel. He would come once a month and we'd sit and talk for about 10 minutes and then he'd leave.
In your interactions with the defendant, were there points and times where you permitted him to ask questions?
Yes, any meeting we had, Mr. Gaspar was free to ask questions. Our first meeting, our rules over the conditions of probation, I encourage and emphasize the need to ask questions because I review a lot with my offenders during that time. So.
And why do you encourage them to ask questions during that time period?
Because if they violate any condition on that order of probation, an excuse, there needs to be no excuse as to I did not understand or I did not know.
And was it in that meeting that you went over with the defendant that his license was suspended?
Yes.
And you made clear to him that he could ask questions, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did the defendant pose to you at that point in time any questions?
No, Mr. Gaspar asked questions about his transfer to Ohio, not about any of the conditions that I reviewed.
In any of your meetings with the defendant, did he ask any questions outside of transferring to Ohio about the conditions of his service with you?
No, Mr. Gaspar told me that he understood all of the conditions, and he signed his order of probation stating that he understood all of the conditions.
What do you mean?
When I review the order of probation, there is a place for my signature after I review it, on the date that I review it, and an area for his signature stating that he understood all of the conditions that we reviewed.
Why do you have somebody sign off that they understood all the conditions that were reviewed?
Again, if he violates any of those conditions, he can face jail time, prison time.
Now, during the course of these meetings with the defendant, was there any point in time where he sought clarification from you in regards to the terms or the conditions of his service with you?
No, ma'am.
Was there any point in time that he called you with questions in regards to his conditions of service with you?
Never the conditions, no, ma'am.
Any point in time where he sought clarification for anything other than transferring his service to another state?
No, ma'am, only the transfer.
One moment, please. Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well, can't complain.
My name is John Sin. I'm going to ask you some questions, and if I ask you anything you don't understand, you can just ask me to rephrase it.
Sure.
Okay? You got a bunch of documents in front of you,
That's correct.
okay? And those documents have a lot of information about Josh in them,
Yes, that's correct.
and there's a lot of stuff blacked out.
Yes.
Okay. We have some rules about what we can talk about and not talk about, but we can infer by the fact that he was on probation to you that Josh got in some trouble down in Alabama.
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware that he had a prescription pill problem when you took him on probation?
No.
Were you aware he had a drug problem?
Probably, depending on what his offense was, then
Okay.
possibly.
And
Depends on his, depends on his offense, what his offense was.
the fact that the judge recommended him to treatment and stuff like that, that kind of...
Yes, the CRO evaluation was to assess him to see if there was any treatment needed.
Now, you monitor folks coming out of prison, right, as well?
Yes, yes, sir. But he, I believe, was sentenced to straight probation.
Right, Josh wasn't the guy who's been to prison, right?
Yes.
Okay. Right?
Yeah, you're right. He wasn't, he was sentenced to straight probation. He didn't serve prison time.
He was sentenced to probation for getting in trouble in Alabama, and the judge said he could go back to
I'm
Ohio.
sorry, counsel, you're
Yeah,
going way
fine.
too fast.
I apologize. He was sentenced to probation,
Yes,
and the judge down there said he could transfer home to Ohio,
that's correct.
but he needed to get into a treatment program.
That was that was a standard stipulation for his offense. Everyone who's in our state who has been convicted of certain offenses must be evaluated by a court referral officer.
We want to get, and that's a drug and alcohol evaluation, is it not?
Behavioral health and mental health treatment.
Okay. Now, you've got an entry of conviction there.
Yes,
And in that entry of conviction, Josh is given a 6-month driver's license suspension.
that's correct.
What is the date on that conviction?
The date of the conviction is August 28, 2015.
And then you saw him in September
Yes.
and told him, hey, you've got a 6-month license suspension. Don't let me catch you driving.
I told him his license will be suspended for 6 months. The date of his suspension is not necessarily the date of his conviction.
When would his suspension begin then?
It could have it depends on the Department of Public Safety.
Okay.
They
So-
sent him notification in the mail when his license was suspended. The Department of Public Safety does.
Okay, so he doesn't necessarily get suspended by you or by the court.
It's not by me, it's by the Department of Public Safety, our state troopers.
Okay, so this isn't a court suspension. This is something that the BMV, the Department of Public Safety deals with.
It is a court suspension because it is ordered by the court. It's suspended for 6 months. So it's state law.
Okay.
It's just governed by the Alabama Department of Public Safety, our state troopers.
So when did Josh's suspension go into effect?
I don't have that information.
So that's not something you would have been able to sit down and tell him, look, on this particular day, you've got a 6-month suspension. You wouldn't know that particular day.
What I tell him is that his driver's license will be suspended for 6 months. That suspension could have started on that date. I don't have that information as to when it starts because the Department of Public Safety sends Mr. Gaspar and other offenders notification.
Okay. Now, Mr. Gaspar was one to transfer home,
Yes,
and you helped him with that.
yes.
And do you know if the Department of Public Safety sent that information to his Alabama address or to his Ohio address?
I don't have that information, sir. I don't know.
You probably didn't talk to that.
I don't have that information, sir.
Okay. What kind of probationer was Josh? Did he give you any problems?
No, Mr. Gaspar never gave me any problems. He just wanted to get to Ohio.
Okay. You're aware he was born and raised in Ohio, his whole family was here?
I knew he had family here. I'm not sure. I don't remember where he was born and raised, but I knew he had family here and a job here.
Do you sometimes have problem probationers?
Absolutely.
Folks who just won't comply with your orders or terms?
Absolutely.
Was Josh one of those types?
Under my supervision, he remained in, under the time, I supervised him for a very short time, but under the short time that I supervised him, he remained in compliance.
Okay, so no issues.
No issues.
And this is a 6-month driver's license suspension.
That's correct, 6 months.
Do you know what he would have to do at the end of the 6 months to get his
Fine and other fees in order to get it back reinstated.
So it's a money thing?
It's state law.
Thank you.
Could we approach, please, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Now, Ms. Baker, you were asked about how the defendant performed on his time of service to you. Recall that question?
Yes, ma'am.
If the defendant would have violated his terms and conditions with you, what would have happened or could have happened?
He's currently in violation, to say that right now. He is a pending probation revocation in our state. But what will happen is he will be sent back possibly to serve his original sentence in prison.
Now, you were asked some questions in regards to the process of how a defendant is notified of their license suspension. Can you go over that process with us based on your understanding?
Sure. Based on my understanding, once you have been sentenced, your driver, for certain offenses, your driver's license is suspended for 6 months. The state prosecutor's office then files paperwork with the Department of Public Safety. Then the Department of Public Safety, they suspend the license for 6 months. The Department of Public Safety notifies the offender of when their license is suspended and the process in getting it reinstated upon its suspension.
Now, you were asked questions by defense counsel about which address that paperwork would have been sent to. Do you know how it's determined what address that information is sent to?
Well, again, under one of Mr. Gaspar's conditions of probation is to always update his address with our circuit clerk's office. So whatever address, that's a condition of his probation, that he notifies the clerk's office with his most current address, be it the Ohio address or his Huntsville address. So I'm not sure what address or which address the Department of Public Safety mailed it to or sent the notification to. However, I know that it's Mr. Gaspar's responsibility to have that. It's a condition of his probation to have his correct address updated with the courts.
Now, why is it a condition of the defendant's probation to have his correct address updated with the court?
Because any offender is liable if a subpoena is issued or if any court document is issued and they are not made aware of that. They are liable for any warrants issued, anything that may be issued for them. So we always have to have an updated information in our system.
And you were asked some questions about the defendant's suspension and the reinstatement process. What is your understanding of the process the defendant would have had to go through for his license?
Yeah, I'm going to object to this line of questioning.
And you were asked questions in regards to the defendant's license being suspended, correct?
Yes.
What information did you provide the defendant in regards to that license being suspended?
The only information I provided was that his license would be suspended for 6 months.
Is it your responsibility to inform the defendant of the process he needs to go through to get that license back as a term of his service with you?
No, that's not my responsibility because the notification that he receives from the Department of Public Safety has all of that information on it.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
I'm a little bit confused. You testified earlier that my client didn't get in any trouble, or he wasn't a bad probationer for you. He didn't do anything wrong while you were supervising him.
under my supervision, under the 4 months that I supervised him, he remained in compliance
So why would he be facing prison in Alabama of a violation?
because he has a new offense.
Which is this?
Yes,
These charges right now are the reason that you violated him down in Alabama.
he hasn't been violated. He has a pending revocation.
Okay.
He hasn't remained in compliance because of this new offense. Probation, condition number 1 states that you are not to violate any state, local, or federal law.
Okay. So at some point you were informed that he was charged with this up here in Ohio?
That's correct.
Who informed you of that?
The interstate compact system.
Okay. And based on that, you have no choice. You got to take it back before the judge.
Yes.
And if this all turns out to be nothing but a tragic accident?
Then he will,
Sustained.
Thank you, ma'am.
Much better, thank you. Would you state and spell your name, please, ma'am?
Robin Pruitt, Robin Pruitt.
And ma'am, where are you employed?
Madison County Circuit Clerk's Office, Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay. How long have you worked there?
19 years.
What is your job title?
I'm the Chief Deputy Clerk in the Circuit Clerk's Office.
In matters in which a request for authentication of your circuit court's documents would be asked to be verified through testimony, would you be the designated representative of that court to perform that function?
I am.
Okay. And are you that person in this instance?
Yes.
Have you had occasion to bring with you documents in your travel to Ohio here to testify concerning the case between the state of Alabama and Joshua Gaspar?
Yes.
I'm going to show you a series of exhibits, and I'd like you to identify what they are.
Okay.
1601, 1602, and 1603.
$16.01 is the plea agreement. 1602 is the sentencing order, and 1603 is what we call a case action summary.
Okay. How did the prosecution, in this instance, obtain those documents?
I sent them. I brought them with me today.
Okay. And how did you locate and identify them?
We have these in every case, and we keep them on the computer system, and they're all scanned into our database.
Okay. Now, and who do they pertain to?
Mr. Joshua Gaspar.
Okay. is there a date of birth or a social as a biographic identifier associated with those documents?
Yes.
Tell us what information you have.
It's redacted.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I believe we have a stipulation of identity on these documents.
We do?
Correct?
It is in our database, but it's redacted on here, so.
That's fine, I understand. You do not personally know Mr. Gaspar?
I do not.
Okay, and you've not had any interaction with him
I have
in
not.
Alabama? Okay. 1 second.
Does your sheriff about the news?
My share?
Does the jailbreak? Is that your county?
No, we've not had a jailbreak. Not since unless it happened since I've been gone, no, no, sir.
Once again, your title?
Chief Deputy Clerk.
Okay. Does Alabama, to your knowledge, participate in the sharing of court records through what's known as the Interstate Compact?
Yes.
Okay. What do you know on that subject?
We have a system called Court, where all of our records are in a electronic format. It all goes in electronically to Montgomery, and they're all online.
So, a circuit court in Alabama, correct me if I'm wrong, I think of the analogy in Ohio would be a county court. It's the court of jurisdiction, for example, for Cleveland is Cuyahoga County. Is that analogous to what the circuit court is in Alabama?
Correct. My county is Madison County.
Okay. Is there more than one circuit court in Madison County?
No.
So,
We have one circuit court in Madison County.
okay, so that's the state level court for that county?
Yes.
All right. So records that are generated by your court that would need to be uploaded to the Interstate Compact wouldn't flow direct from your county or your circuit court. Your court would transmit to the state, and then at the state level, someone would take on that
Correct.
function.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not your function to upload those documents?
No, we upload to Montgomery, and then Montgomery sends from there.
Okay. And do you know whether or not that was done in this instance?
We would have uploaded to Montgomery, and then Montgomery would have taken it from there, yes.
If Ohio queried, that is, made a computer inquiry, the Interstate Compact system, and did not find electronic record notice of this circumstance in Alabama,
Right.
Can you possibly explain why that might occur?
It would have had to have been some breakdown between Montgomery and Ohio.
Okay. And 1601, 1602, 1603, are those fair and accurate reproductions of
They
the
are.
records on file with your court?
Yes,
Okay. And are they maintained in the ordinary course of business by your court?
they are.
Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine, thanks.
How are you enjoying Ohio?
Nice, thanks.
You came at the right time.
Yeah,
I'm coming February, won't be near.
Right.
How many of you folks come up from Alabama for this trial?
I don't know, just me from my office.
Okay. And you get a plane ticket?
Yes,
The state bought you a plane ticket to come up here?
yes,
They put you in a hotel?
yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
This license suspension that my client is charged with having down in Alabama, do you have any information about that in those documents?
Yes.
When did that begin?
It would have, I can't tell you a date on the plea agreement. It states that his license would be suspended for 6 months.
Okay. And what's the date on that plea agreement?
The plea agreement is dated, looks like the 19th of February, 2015.
Okay.
Now, I can't tell you the date that it would go into effect. That would be up to the Department of Public Safety.
Okay. Well, I know that the plea agreement might be different than a sentencing date, though, right? Because sentencing...
Sentencing is August the 28th of 2015.
And that's when the judge himself.
That's when it would have gone, that's when the sentencing would go into effect.
Okay. Do you know anything about the steps he would need to take to get his Alabama license back?
That would go through the Department of Public Safety.
Okay. Are you familiar with their rules and regulations at all?
That all is handled by them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, Judge. Thank you.
The state will call Dina Pregno, Your Honor.
Yeah, you can probably raise your right hand. Solemnly swear or affirm such as the bill is true. This testimony about give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
So, yes.
Please be seated.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Dina, D-E-E-N-A, Pregno, P-R-E-G-N-O.
And Ms. Pregno, are you employed?
Yes,
By whom?
Alabama Law Enforcement Agency,
And which division of the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency are you currently assigned to?
Driver License Division,
And how long have you been employed by the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency?
21 years,
How long have you been with the Department of Safety?
21 years.
And can you tell us what some of your assignments are there?
I started as a road trooper, was promoted to corporal in Highway Patrol, promoted to sergeant in Protective Services Division. I was assigned to Special Projects that built our new academy, was a lieutenant at the Highway Patrol Division post, served as assistant commander there. I was promoted to captain at the Service Division, and then from the Service Division I went to the Driver License Division and promoted to ALEA Chief and
I'm sorry,
Driver License.
promoted to?
ALEA, A-L-E-A, Chief in the Driver License Division.
And how long have you been at the Driver's License Division?
4 years.
And what are your assignments and duties there?
Oversee the operations and implementation of the Driver's License Division.
And can you explain to us, in general terms, what is the process that occurs when an individual's license is suspended in the state of Alabama?
Once we receive notification from an agency that they have committed a violation that would cause a suspension, we send a letter of suspension to the driver stating the date of their suspension. If they would like to reinstate, they can contact our offices, and it also states the date of suspension and what the cost is to reinstate.
Okay. And after somebody receives that notice, what is the process they have to go through in order to reinstate their license?
They have to serve the suspension period, and then once their suspension period is over, they can pay their reinstatement fee and have their license privileges reinstated.
Now, once the suspension is over in Alabama, is the license automatically reinstated?
Once they pay their fee, and if they are in current standing, yes. If they are not in current standing, they will have to either renew or retest, depending on the type of suspension or revocation.
If the type of suspension has a time frame associated with it, at the end of that time frame, is their license automatically reinstated?
No, ma'am, not until they pay a reinstatement fee.
How are individuals notified of the process they must undertake in order to have their license reinstated?
They would contact our reinstatement office. They would in turn send a letter stating all the requirements for them to be reinstated.
I want to turn your attention to the individual Joshua Gaspar. Were you tasked with completing an investigation in regards to the status of his license and his suspension?
Yes.
And during the course of your investigation, what information did you obtain?
He was suspended.
And do you recall what the suspension date was?
11/20 of 15, I believe.
Are there documents or records that are kept in association with someone's driving record?
Yes.
And are they retained by your department?
Yes.
Are they retained in the ordinary course of business?
Yes.
My approach, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Ma'am, I'm handing you what has been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 1604, 1605, 1606, and 1608. Can you take a moment to review those items, please? And do you recognize those items, ma'am?
Yes.
How are you able to recognize them?
These are records from our driver license issuance and record system.
I'm also handing you what has been marked for identification purposes. Oh, I'm sorry, can I approach your honor?
Yes.
As State's Exhibit 1607. Can you review that item as well, please? Do you recognize that item?
Yes, ma'am.
And how are you able to do so?
It's part of our driver license record system.
Okay. And are those exhibits in the same or substantially similar condition to when you provided them to the state?
Yes, they are.
And are they fair, accurate depiction of the records from your division?
Yes, ma'am.
Starting with State's Exhibit 1604. Can you tell us what that exhibit is?
It's basically a snapshot of the issuances that were given to Mr. Gaspar.
And what issuances were given to the defendant?
A driver license was issued January 17th of 2012, and an ID card was issued January 26th of 2016.
Now, can you tell us what an ID card is?
It is a non-driver identification card.
And can an individual have a driver's license or identification card at the same time?
In the state of Alabama, you're only allowed to have one document. In the case of Mr. Gaspar, if you are suspended, if a subject has been suspended or revoked, we will issue them an ID card so they can have government documents, an identification document.
And is that the reason the defendant was issued an identification card in this case?
In the issuance of an ID card, which is Exhibit 1606, the intake process where the examiner provided information, it says birth verification document is suspended Alabama DL.
And in regards to State's Exhibit 1606, would the defendant have been required to sign off on that document?
Yes, he provided a signature.
And when did the defendant sign the document indicating that he was receiving an identification card because his license was suspended?
It was January 26th of 2016.
Now, turning your attention to State's Exhibit 1605, can you explain to us what that is?
That is the driver license issuance.
And State's Exhibit 1607,
That is the driver license record.
and does that show information regarding the defendant's suspension?
Yes.
Right, and what information is contained in there in regards to the suspension?
It shows his status is suspended in the state of Alabama. A suspension letter was mailed out July 5, 2015, and stating the suspension started, I'm sorry, I need to correct that. The suspension letter was mailed out November 5 of 2015. The effective suspension date started November 20 of 2015 for a 6-month period.
And so, based on that documentation, the State's Exhibit 1608, was there an end date listed for the defendant's suspension?
It would be 6 months from the effective date, which would have been November 20 of 2015, and he would have been eligible for reinstatement May 20th of 2016.
Now, when you say eligible for reinstatement, what does that mean?
He has to meet all the requirements. He has to pay his reinstatement fee, and if he's required to retest, he would have to retest or renew if his license was expired.
So, based on that, there's no automatic return of his license to good standing?
No, ma'am.
And is the defendant notified of the process or the fact that he must go through a process in order to reinstate?
Yes, ma'am.
And how does that notification occur?
It'll be sent out once he contacts our reinstatement office. They'll send a letter of eligibility.
And in the records that you have, State's Exhibit 1604 through State's Exhibit 1608, is that the complete information in regards to this defendant's driving information in the state of Alabama?
Yes.
Including that information, does it indicate whether or not the defendant's Alabama license, what is the current status of that?
It is still suspended.
Can you explain to us what steps, if any, the defendant took to reinstate his Alabama license?
We don't have any documentation of him actually making contact with us to do so.
So there's no information the defendant ever contacting you all to reinstate his Alabama license?
Correct.
And the defendant was advised that he had to complete a reinstatement process at the end of his suspension?
If he contacted us, he would have been advised.
And he was issued, as opposed to a driver's license, a state identification card when?
January 26th of 2016.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Now, is there an issuance period for his identification card?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that period?
January 26th of 2016 was the issue date. It expired January 26th of 2024.
So as of now, is his state identification card in Alabama still valid?
Yes,
Had he reinstated his Alabama license, would he still have that Alabama identification card?
if he had come in to reinstate with us, we would take it once we issue his new license back to him.
Sorry, go ahead.
Once we issue a new license, we would take that identification card.
And why is that?
Because in the state of Alabama, you're only allowed to hold one document.
Now, if the defendant was suspended in your state, well, scratch that. Are you familiar with the Interstate Compact Agreement?
Driver license compact agreement, yes.
And what is your understanding of that agreement?
That if you're suspended in one state, those other states that agree to the driver's license compact, that you're also suspended in that state as well.
And based on your knowledge, is Ohio a signer of that agreement?
Yes.
And what is the process for notifying other states of those suspensions?
There is a report that's run, and we check to show that if it's suspended, we take them out of the system, and I'm not sure what the process of Ohio would be.
Based on your understanding of that agreement, if someone is suspended in your state and they disclose to another state that they are suspended in your state, could a license be issued to them?
Objection.
No,
Why is that?
because the driver's license compact agreement.
Okay. So if he was suspended, if the defendant was in fact suspended in November of 2015, as you stated, would his 6-month suspension from Alabama, regardless of any reinstatement process, still have been in place in February of 2016?
Yes,
And why is that?
because he was not eligible to reinstate until May of 2016.
And is, basically your understanding, how much time period is there between January, I believe you said 26th of 2016 and February 11th of 2016?
You said January 26th and February 11th,
Yes, ma'am.
approximately 12 days, 13 days.
Hold on, please, Your Honor.
My math may be off.
And when the defendant applies for that ID card on January 26th of 2016, does he have to sign for that?
Yes,
And in that paperwork, is there an acknowledgement that his Alabama license is suspended as of January 26th of 2016?
yes, ma'am.
And the defendant would have to sign off on that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good. I'm John Sin. I'm going to ask you some questions. If I ask anything that doesn't make sense, you can just ask me to repeat it, okay? You are a state trooper, but that's how you've been a state trooper for your whole career, but right now you're working as a trooper in charge of these driver's licenses. Is that kind of safe to say?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, will Alabama give a license to anybody from any state, a driver's license?
If they hold a valid license in that state.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is why would a resident of Ohio get an Alabama license? Would that make any sense to you?
Are you referring to the issuance in 2012?
No, I'm talking about the reinstatement. Are you aware that Mr. Gaspar moved from Alabama to Ohio?
No.
Okay. It wouldn't make any sense for him to go back to Alabama to get an Alabama license if he no longer is driving on the roads of Alabama, would it?
Objection, Your Honor.
Do you understand the question?
Repeat it, please.
Does it make any sense to you why somebody would go back to Alabama to get a license to drive on the roads of Alabama when they don't live in Alabama, they've moved to Ohio?
No, they would transfer their Alabama license to Ohio.
Okay. Let's talk about these dates you got there. Now, my client was convicted in August of 2015. Why did it take until November to suspend his license?
Because it depends on when the court provides us the documentation when we put it into the system.
Do you know if he was still a resident of your state back in November 2015?
Well, in January, he was issued an ID card at the 13899 Curley Drive, Southwest, Huntsville. So he's claiming that he's a resident of Alabama.
Okay. Now, this license suspension would have been up, no matter what we're talking about, by September of 2016.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. But for the fact he owed y'all some money.
He was required to pay a reinstatement fee.
And I'm looking at the piece of paper you have here, and that piece of paper says, it's signed by you, Ms. Dina Prego. It's in those documents he gave you, but that's all he had to do was pay you folks some money.
Correct.
Why would someone pay the state of Alabama money when they're not in Alabama, they're in Ohio?
Because he had to clear the status of his Alabama license to obtain an Ohio license.
Okay, let's talk about that. Does Alabama have any authority over the Ohio Driver's License Bureau?
No, sir.
Can the state of Alabama on its own suspend an Ohio license? Or do they have to give the information to Ohio and Ohio suspends it?
We give the information to Ohio.
Okay. Now, are you aware my client had a valid Ohio driver's license while under suspension in Alabama?
No, sir.
You're not aware of that? Okay. Now, if your agency failed to put a block in the computer that would notify Ohio that this guy is suspended in Alabama, whose fault would that be?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Would you realistically expect somebody that goes to the Ohio BMV and doesn't need anything from Alabama to get a valid Ohio license to just send you guys money anyway? Would that make any sense to you? Sending the $350 just
To clear the status of his Alabama license.
But if he's not going back to Alabama and he's got a valid Ohio license, what could the reason be to send money to you guys? No further questions.
And we said something about the defendant having to transfer his license from Alabama to Ohio, correct?
Yes.
Can you explain that process of transferring a license from one state to another?
When an out-of-state resident comes in, they bring in a certified birth certificate, proof of Social Security, and their out-of-state license.
Now, would his Alabama license have had to be valid in order for the transfer to Ohio to be valid?
It should have been, yes,
Why is that?
because of the driver license compact.
And you said no matter what, the defendant's license suspension would have been up in September of 2016, correct?
Correct.
Now, would that suspension have still been lifted if he failed to take the necessary steps to reinstate his license?
No.
So if the defendant failed to take the necessary steps in Alabama to reinstate his license, regardless of the 6-month time period, that license suspension would have still been in place, correct?
It still is today,
Why?
because he has not met all the requirements to reinstate his Alabama privileges.
So there are additional requirements in addition to the time frame?
Yes, he has to pay a reinstatement fee.
And you said something about the defendant having to clear his Alabama license in order to obtain an Ohio license. What did you mean by that?
To take it back to a valid status, from a suspended status to a valid status.
And you were asked some questions by the defense counsel about the only thing the defendant had remaining to do was pay this reinstatement fee, correct?
Yes,
But that was still an outstanding requirement in order for his Alabama license to be valid, correct?
Correct.
And the defendant never fulfilled that requirement, correct?
Correct.
And based on your understanding of the interstate compact agreement, would that requirement have had to be met in order for the defendant to obtain a valid license in another state?
Yes.
Based on your understanding, did the defendant ever meet that requirement?
No.
As of February of 2016, did he meet that requirement?
No.
As of March of 2016, did he meet that requirement?
No.
May of 2016, did he meet that requirement?
No.
June of 2016, July of 2016,
No.
August of 2016,
No.
September of 2016,
No.
October of 2016.
No.
Till this date, has the defendant satisfied the requirements imposed under his Alabama suspension for him to obtain a valid license in any other jurisdiction that is tied to this interstate compact agreement?
No, he has not.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
But Ohio gave him a license. Right?
If you say they did.
You guys didn't put a block in.
I'm not sure what happened.
Okay. Can my client have any control over what happens at your agency?
No.
So if you guys didn't put your block in March 2015, April of 2015, May of 2015, June of 2015, you guys didn't do what you were supposed to do, and Ohio gave him a valid license, whose fault is that?
I don't know whose fault because we don't know where the breakdown was.
If you went to the Ohio B&B and said, what do I need to do to get a license? And he took those steps and he has a valid Ohio license, there's nothing the state of Alabama can do over the state of Ohio. Correct? You've got no authority over Ohio.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do.
Lawrence, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mary's taking down everything you say. Make sure you speak slowly and into the mic, as you might remember those chairs don't really move.
Okay.
Okay? Lawrence, would you state your full name and spell your full name for the record?
Lawrence John Mikla, M-I-K-L-A,
Where are you currently arrested?
Florida.
Where are you currently employed?
I'm retired.
Where did you retire from?
City of North Olmsted Police Department,
How long were you with them?
25 years.
At the time of your retirement, what was your role?
Patrolman and evidence technician.
And what date, I'm sure you remember, did you retire?
January 6, 2017.
So on September 15th of 2016, were you still employed by the North Olmsted Police Department?
Yes, I was.
Were you on duty that day?
No, I was not.
What were you doing that day?
I was running some errands.
Okay. And where were you when you were running errands?
We were leaving North Olmsted and we were heading towards Lakewood.
Do you remember possibly how you were dressed?
Jeans and a t-shirt, I believe.
So you weren't in your uniform?
That's correct, I was not.
And how did you exit to get to Lakewood?
We went on the highway, I-90, took that eastbound. I'm not sure the exit. I don't travel that area a lot, but I've been in this area. I have the uncanny ability of getting to a place I need to get to without necessarily knowing the names of the roads that I use to get there. But we were on our way to Lakewood.
When you say eastbound, are you heading towards Cleveland or away?
Towards Cleveland.
And when you exit, do you remember what road you ended up on?
It was a marginal road that parallels the highway.
Can you explain that a little bit to the jury? Are you able to see the highway from that road?
In places, yes.
And in other places, what happens?
Trees, bushes.
When you initially got off and stopped at the traffic light, were you able to see the highway?
Yes.
What did you observe?
Where we were stopped, if you look to our left, which would be north, down on the highway, you could see the eastbound lanes, the full lanes, you could see the median area, and you could see the full westbound lanes. In the westbound lanes, along the median wall, in between that and the high-speed lane, there was a marked State Highway Patrol cruiser with a state trooper just outside of that cruiser running a speed detection device, a laser.
Can you explain to the jury how the trooper was positioning himself?
The car was facing westbound. The door was open on the car. He was between the open door and the car, and he was in full uniform, and he had his laser device holding it up, tracking speeds of cars that were westbound.
And were you looking at the traffic that was passing him? Did you see it?
Yeah, you could see you could see both lanes of traffic.
Why watch this trooper at all? I mean, why did that stick out to you?
He's a brother in blue, and he's doing what I've been doing for years. It's just a connection.
So, are you saying you also did traffic enforcement?
That's correct, but I would be in the jurisdiction of North Olmsted, usually on Interstate 480 earlier in my career.
In traffic, did you notice it being extremely heavy, moving at any strange speeds?
I would say moderate. It wasn't stop and go. It wasn't. It was steady.
I mean, were people able to travel the speed limit from what you were able to tell?
As far as I could tell, yes.
What did you do after you were watching the trooper?
The light turned. The traffic control light turned, so we were able to advance. As we advanced, we left the sight line from where the trooper was, and we completely lost sight of him.
And at that time, initially when you were looking at the highway, did you see any sort of debris on the highway?
No.
So then when you proceed and you can't see the trooper, what happens next?
As we approached the intersection, I could hear a thud, a dull thud, followed shortly after by another sound as if something might have been being run over. And I thought that was odd. There was nothing in the road, and if there was something in the road and it's in the traffic way, usually if cars are going over it, you can hear each tire make contact with whatever it was. I only heard that noise once, though, and it was immediately after the thud. It was shortly followed by tires squealing, not panic stop braking, more of a swerving tires. There was a lot of, just that noise was apparent.
I mean, this thud that you hear, can you describe it? Did it sound like metal against metal, like when two cars crash into one another?
No, it wasn't a car crash.
What did you do next?
As I turned onto whatever street that traffic control light was at the top of at the intersection of the marginal, once on the overpass, I could look down on the highway and I could see that there were cars swerving, cars coming to a stop, and I could see something was in or near the roadway.
Did you at that time deduce something had happened?
Yes, because there was that traffic condition wasn't like that when I was on the marginal looking, and there wasn't anything in the roadway that I could see from being elevated, and I couldn't see the trooper, and I kind of put two and two together and realized it was probably the trooper that was in the roadway.
Now, you're an emergency responder.
Yes.
So what did you decide to do?
Instead of continuing into Lakewood, I entered the highway ramp, went down to the westbound lanes. There's a grassy area, I believe it's called a gore, I was able to park there without interfering with entrance ramp traffic or the highway. And I exited my vehicle and went over to where the trooper was.
Were you able to cross traffic to get to him?
Yes.
Did you need to administer CPR or anything like that?
By the time I got to him, there were already 2 people with him, a male and a female. One or both might have been wearing some type of scrubs that kind of indicated to me that it would have been something along the lines of a medical professional. I looked at the condition of the trooper and there was nothing I could do for him, and I hope that he was in better hands with the people that were there before me.
So is it safe to say you are the first police officer on scene?
I believe so.
Do you remember seeing any other cars?
There were other cars that were stopped, but I don't believe there were any other law enforcement people there.
What did you do next?
I started to assess. I had a lot of things going through my mind. This lane needs to be blocked. I need to try and locate witnesses. I need to try and start photographs. I need to make notifications of agencies. It was in Lakewood, I believe, near the Rocky River border. It might have been near the Cleveland border. I wanted to try and call and make notification. I wanted to get a hold of State Patrol. There was a lot of things that I needed to do, but I had no marked car, I had no uniform, no radio, no equipment.
So what did you do first?
I think at that point, I went to the trooper's car, entered his vehicle, and I hadn't had any luck on my cell phone. It was probably user error more than the phone, but I eventually got on the radio inside his car because I knew that would go to State Patrol.
So, we're going to back up a little bit. Do you have experience with using these types of radios?
Yes.
When you broadcasted on your radio as a North Olmsted officer, did it broadcast to the State Patrol as far as you knew?
Not to my knowledge.
Could you hear their radio traffic?
No.
Okay. So, can you explain to the jury a little bit how this works? Are there different stations for each agency? At least what you know about it.
In North Olmsted, on our police two-way radio system, we share the radios with Bay Village, Rocky River, Fairview Park, Westlake. So when we broadcast, we're broadcasting over pretty much the entire West Shore area of Cuyahoga County. Unfortunately, we can't talk to Metro Park Rangers, State Patrol, other police agencies unless we specifically go to a channel that they are assigned, and we would have to know that channel and be able to go to that frequency in order to talk to them. It can be done, but I have no idea what frequency or channels other agencies are on.
So when you go into a State Patrol car, is it your assumption that is going directly to the Ohio State Highway Patrol?
It is.
Why are you calling them?
It was their trooper that was down.
So how did you do your broadcast? What did you say?
There was a unit number on his car. I called that unit number. I didn't get any response from dispatch. I called the unit number again, and a voice came over and said, "That's not right."
I'm going to stop you. So does every police agency have different calls? So from a deputy sheriff to a state highway patrolman to you as a North Olmsted officer, are there different call-outs that they might have?
They might have, yes.
Okay. So they tell you that's wrong. What do you do next?
I was between not being able to use the cell phone and not having an immediate response on the radio. I said something along the lines of, "This is off-duty patrolman Lawrence Mikla, North Olmsted, Ohio Police Department. I'm on I-90 westbound. There's a trooper that's been injured and he needs help."
Once you did that, did the patrol cars start rolling?
Yes. I don't know exactly what time, but their help came.
And do you remember who showed up first?
Initially, a male approached while I was sitting in the car and identified himself as an off-duty state highway patrolman and said he needed access to the car. So I vacated the car, he got in the car, and that's when I noticed that other emergency response vehicles were coming. I believe an ambulance was coming down the highway. There was also some Lakewood marked police cars that were on the highway.
there was a voice nobody recognized. Would that have been you?
Yes.
What did you do next?
I noticed that the ambulance that was trying to get to the scene between where the police vehicle was stopped in the median lane and where the cars had been stopped on the highway, there was a very small gap, and I didn't think the ambulance would be able to make it through that gap. I left the trooper car and went to where the ambulance was and was able to get that ambulance through that blockage and up to the scene.
During your time on scene, did you ever become aware of who the driver of the vehicle was?
Eventually, yes.
Did you ever personally go up and speak with him?
No.
Did you ever make any observations?
Made observations, yes.
Up close and personal, in his face?
Not in his face or up close.
It wasn't your job on scene to assess him, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you give a statement on scene?
I did.
Who did you give that to?
I was State Highway Patrolman.
How did that happen?
He approached me, identified himself. I believe he was a plainclothes. I think he stated that his rank was sergeant, and asked me if I could describe what my involvement was. And then after verbally explaining what my involvement was, he asked if I could make a written statement.
Did you feel any pressure to make that statement?
No,
Did you feel like the sergeant handled this profession?
I did.
About how long did you stay on scene?
Approximately 2 hours, a little bit more.
Did you have any other role in this investigation other than getting help to the scene?
No.
One moment here. Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
No questions. Thank you, officer.
Ladies and gentlemen, how are you all doing? Ladies and gentlemen, we've gone through witnesses that were expected to be here this morning, so we're going to take an earlier lunch. No one's complaining about that, I assume. If you're back downstairs at 12:45, there is a witness that is expected to be here for 1 o'clock. So we'll proceed that. We will be ending a little earlier today at 3:30. So for anybody that wants to go home and enjoy a beautiful day, cut your grass or something, you can do that. Keep in mind, don't discuss this case, don't let anyone discuss the case with you. No former expressing opinions, no investigation, no media, but do enjoy a beautiful summer day. Thanks.
All rise.
Definitely do that, 12:45.
Let us lunch.
Yeah, come on, thank you.